Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. My name is Roy Kessel and I'm your host today. We're very excited to have you join with us as we have another great guest. Today we're being joined by Erin Kennedy. Erin is the COO and co-founder of Girls Rugby. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roy. I'm excited to be here.
We're thrilled that you are able to join us today, and we know you've done incredible work developing the program, and we want to dive into that in more detail and hear more specifics about what you've done with Girls Rugby. But before we go down that course, I wanted to jump in and hear a little bit more about your background and have you share with our listeners kind of the trail of what led you this direction.
Sure. So, where do I start? I've been working in sports development for the last 11 years, particularly focusing my time within rugby and some other stuff. But I really started off with getting into sports with my master's degree. So I'd grown up and played sports my entire life. And then I ended up pursuing my master's in sports psychology. And that really launched into my sport development career, which I started at USA Rugby back in 2009 and worked within youth development with USA Rugby for almost 5 years, and then started to kind of expand from there. So within my rugby career, I've worked with USA Rugby, I've worked with Rugby Canada. I currently hold a position with Rugby Americas North, which is our regional association that covers all of North America. And primarily within that time is focusing on youth development, trying to get more kids involved in the game, women's development, trying to increase opportunities for more females to participate in rugby, and then just overall coach development, referee development, overall development of the game, just getting more rugby happening in North America. I also did a part-time, about 1.5-year contract with the International Olympic Committee in Switzerland back in 2015 and 2016. So got to expand out from rugby a little bit, but rugby pulled me back. So I came back to the United States, and then I started working in rugby again. And then it was 2017, I got together with my business partners and we started dreaming really big on what we wanted to create for Girls Rugby. And then we launched Girls Rugby in 2018, which is a nonprofit organization in the United States, focused on getting more girls involved in the game of rugby and also focused on female leadership and development. So that's sort of been a quick snapshot of my career path over the last 11 years. Very rugby heavy, but really just about sports development and creating more opportunities.
Well, as you said, very, very rugby heavy. So when you were growing up, you talked about playing a lot of different sports. Tell us what sports you played while you were going through those different stages.
Yeah, and people are really surprised to know that I didn't actually start playing rugby until I think I was 24, is when I started working at USA Rugby. So I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and I played every sport imaginable, but I focused on the main three, which I did basketball, softball, and I ran cross country as well in high school. Softball was my main sport, and I played that in college as well. And then I didn't really discover rugby until I got the job, and then I was, I think, a week on the job, and I decided to join the local team. So sports has always been just a huge part of my life, and has given me so much and really prepared me in the roles that I'm in. So that's why I'm involved in it now, to get more kids involved and give them the same experiences that I had.
Well, it's fantastic that you took that opportunity. And it's interesting when you look around and see how people are jumping into sports, just as you said, that are different from the sports that they may have played growing up. So you're playing softball. What was your position that you focused on when you were playing softball?
I was general outfield. I think by the time I was in high school, I was probably like center field, I think mainly center field and left field. I was fast, so I needed to be in the outfield so I could chase down the balls. But yeah, outfield was anywhere in the outfield. Overall.
So we're sensing a theme here with the fast, with the cross country, with the softball, and what about on the basketball court?
Yeah, I was a guard. I'm not very tall, so I was not you wouldn't find me down by the basket too much, but I was pretty good on defense, so pretty fast on defense, and was more of a shooting guard for sure in basketball.
That's great. And so as you started transitioning to rugby, it sounds like that, in a sense, just happened. Is that the right way to describe it? That you got involved and had an opportunity in rugby? And what attracted you after you first started working in rugby to recognize that this was really where you wanted to go? You've got all these other sports and a background in a variety of different areas. And yet something has kept you in the rugby world now for 15 years.
Yeah, so when I was doing my master's program, I really focused a lot on coaching education. And it was, in all the sports that I had played when I was younger, one of the biggest things that was really prominent and that I remembered or made a big impact on me was whether I had a really great coach or I had a really bad coach. So I started to explore the field of coaching education within sports psychology, and realizing there was a huge market for it, and especially within that just overall youth development sector of sports. So when I was finishing up my degree, an opportunity came available within USA Rugby in the youth development department. And the woman who was leaving the position that I was applying for was actually leaving to get her master's in sports psychology. And I had just finished mine. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And so when I applied, I knew nothing about rugby, nothing. I had actually Googled the sport, like I was YouTubing and watching things online. I knew very little about it. And I, not sure what's going on with my dog right now. And when in the interview, I remember asking them, I said, oh, gosh, I was like, I don't know anything about this sport, right? And they said, they recognized we have people who know rugby. We need people who know other stuff. So that was a chance for me to kind of take coaching education as a small piece, but then put it into a greater youth development sector and actually get in and do some work around the game. The actual playing of rugby, I think it was, it started about a week on the job. I went out and joined the local women's team, and I wish I would have found rugby when I was younger. I really do, because there is a culture, and if you talk to anyone about rugby, they're going to tell you not necessarily about how great it is physically on the field and what they're doing, but the culture and the family that comes with the game, the inclusivity around, you can be of any different skill type, body type, background, doesn't matter. There's a spot for you in that family and on that team. So it's a culture that I wish we found it in every other sport. So immediately I kind of fell in love with just what rugby was, not just within locally, but then globally, and how well connected you are to other people within the sport. And then I just knew that was the space I wanted to be in. And as I mentioned, I did a small short-term contract that was not rugby with the International Olympic Committee. And I found myself near the end saying, yeah, I need to go back, because it's a world that I need to be in, because it fits. And it's just a fantastic experience and culture overall. And that's why I love to work in it and be involved in it in every way that I can.
It's interesting, because I know a number of people from different parts of the sports business world that have very strong rugby backgrounds. And as you say, it's a very close-knitted group, right? The rugby community and the people that play really stick together, right? And a lot of other sports, people play, but they kind of go their own way. The other sport that connects with me in a similar fashion as a lot of the guys I still play hockey with. You just find people that play hockey, and that becomes part of a community that kind of stays together. And the rugby world really reminds me of that, in terms of how they stick together, interact, having reunions decades after they've been done
Absolutely.
playing.
You can go anywhere in the world, and if you're wearing something rugby, you're gonna meet people. I've heard stories of people who have traveled and they meet somebody about something rugby, and they invite them to stay at their houses or come like have dinner with their families. And it's just like these random people you meet, but rugby and like sport in general it's just that connector. It's that universal language that we all, tie into, which is really cool.
So now you said 2017, you got together with two other individuals to put together the plan for girls rugby. So tell us a little bit more about each of them and how you connected with them to decide that this was a good plan. And I know you said you launched in 2018, and most people don't recognize how difficult it is to get everything set up and get all the pieces in place. And they think of the filing process of boom, I click a couple buttons on the computer, set up my entity with the Secretary of State, and file a form with the IRS, and I'm good to go, right? And it's not quite that easy. So tell us about the process and how you went through that.
Sure. And I think, it's worth noting, so I started working rugby in 2009, and from 2009 to 2017, the work that I did around the game, and then for my business partners as well. So Jen and Hannah also worked in rugby and were very much involved. The reason this came, I started with a phone call, and I called both of them up and said, I think we need to do something here, because looking at the programs that we're developing, you'd see the number of boys coming into rugby programs was far vast beyond anything for girls. And I had tried in my time at USA Rugby and Rugby Canada and all my other jobs to create resources that would help enable more girls to come into the game and help organizations like our state organizations and USA Rugby and those that govern rugby within their state lines to here are some resources that will help you increase the number of girls. And even though we had those resources, it just wasn't happening in practice. So it got to the point where I felt like I need to actually do something about this and not just create a resource for somebody else to use. I need to actually create the system and create the opportunity for girls to come into the game. So I called up Jen and Hannah. So I've known both Jen and Hannah for a number of years. I met Jen through my time at USA Rugby. She, for 17 years, ran Rugby Oregon, which is the state organization that governs youth and high school rugby within Oregon state lines. So it has a wealth of knowledge and background around running a nonprofit that works in rugby. And then Hannah had been, she kind of grew up through that Oregon system. She's a former member of our national team and has represented the United States in rugby. And then she also got involved in a bit of development. So just my friendship and relationships with them over the last 11 years, it made perfect sense that these two would want to be involved. So we decided to fly ourselves to one location, and we went, Hannah was living in San Diego at the time. So we flew to San Diego, locked ourselves in a room for 3 days and just started dreaming. And, when you looked at the numbers, specifically with rugby, because there's two really main components to our programming, which is the rugby piece, but then there's also the leadership and values-based curriculum piece. So more about just empowering girls to be the leaders of tomorrow with the skills that they gain and being really deliberate about that. So we knew we wanted those two pieces. And from a rugby side, the number, it was somewhere like between 5,000 and 6,000 was the total number of kids registered with USA Rugby that played non-contact rugby. So this is rugby with flag belts, it's no tackling, very safe, great way to learn the basics of the game. And there's about, we'll say 5,500 kids in the United States playing non-contact rugby that were registered, and only 1,000 of them were girls. And of those 1,000, 100% of them were playing in co-ed programs. So we knew, just based on a lot of research and other organizations that are doing girl-specific programming and tailoring their product and their programs to the needs of a young female, that they have a lot better success. So that was, we knew we wanted to create programming that was going to be just for girls, all non-contact, great introduction to the game in order to increase those numbers at that lower level. So we, and then build out the other piece as well. So we wanted to be really deliberate. We know that kids learn so many different things from sports. we actually wanted to be deliberate about it and say, this week, you're going to get a different value, and we're going to focus on leadership components and sportsmanship and teamwork and respect and all those great things that sports can give you, but be, again, really deliberate about delivering it in that curriculum form. So we put it together. We had the conversation at the end of 2017. We said we're going to do some pilot programs, and we've decided to launch those in fall of 2018 to give ourselves a good solid year of preparation. So we launched in early 2018 and then had our first pilot programs in the fall of 2018 as well.
So that's a lot of planning that you had going on there in terms of the work and laying that foundation. It's interesting to me because you typically see in organizations one of two formats, either a group like yourselves that really had 3 strong people working together with aligned vision and putting in the time and effort to do all the planning and put together the structure in advance. And then on the other hand, you get people who say, I want to start something next week, and they get up and they start running programs, and then they kind of feel their way along as they do it. And obviously, once you get going, you may get to the same point, but I would imagine once you launched that first year, it sounds like you guys had a lot of the pieces in place, but that first year is still always really challenging to get off the ground. So tell us a little bit about what that looked like.
Yeah, and I think in everything that we do, it's really important that we get feedback and we do research. So, we don't want to just put something in place and assume it's going to work. So that was the whole point of the pilot programs, is we wanted to make sure we kind of tested. We had this dream. We knew what we wanted to do. We were pretty sure it was going to work, but we weren't, we wanted to test that out. So we decided to do 3 pilot programs, give ourselves a year to plan in advance. At the time, Hannah was in San Diego, Jen was in Portland, Oregon, and then I was in Denver, Colorado. So it made sense to have those 3 locations be our pilot programs. And we tried a few different things within each, and just started launching. So we worked on forming a lot of great partnerships with other organizations that aligned with our values and could help us kind of promote what we were doing. We got every key piece in place in terms of who was kind of managing the programs and where our coaches were coming from, our volunteers. And then we launched, and we had, so our programs run for 7 weeks, 7-week league, and you have a day of the week of practice, and then a day for games that you play as well. And then each week there's the different values as well as the different rugby skills. So the girls are getting a lot of the basics around rugby as well as leadership, and then they're coming together for different locations to play lots of round robin games. The focus is not on competition. The focus is on, again, that whole great rugby culture that we have, learning, developing, and of course having a blast doing it. So we launched our 3 pilot programs in kind of Portland, Southwest Washington area, greater San Diego area, and then Denver. And we had 120 girls registered across all 3 programs. And some of the really fun things were that we actually, 80% of them were brand new to the game. So I think we had it was 95 girls who had never played rugby before, but found this great opportunity in our programming. And we also were, I believe, for the 2018-2019 season within USA Rugby, we were actually 33% of the registered number of girls. So we were the reason why that category within USA Rugby was growing, and that was only our first season. So it took a lot of work to get up and going. And I think, it's worth noting, for me, Jen and Hannah, we all had full-time jobs. We still do. We actually don't get paid to do girls rugby. It is our passion project through and through. Eventually that's the dream and the goal that we'll get there, where we can get paid to do what we love. But we're putting as much in as we can to create those more opportunities. And it was such a great first year to get some traction, build a brand, get a following, and then have those 120 girls go through our program for the first season. And then we've just been able to build from there. And I think again, with the research stuff, it was great to test it within a pilot. And then we also surveyed our girls and our parents, and one of the really fun things, like in our first season, 91% of parents that we surveyed said, my daughter's actually more confident because of girls rugby. And they're making new friends and they're better leaders on the field and better team players. And we got all this great data and feedback around this was the program for her, it's for their daughter. And she actually found a fit in something that really made sense where she hadn't found that before. So it's stories like that that just make that first year wildly successful for us. In addition to just obviously setting up the business and getting the nonprofit status and all of that, the impact that we were able to make in one season was just phenomenal. And that's why we're continuing to do it.
Well, it's interesting. You brought the three of you together, and as you said, you're continuing to work other jobs essentially to subsidize your passion to be able to help and bring girls into this rugby space. So good teams are often made up of complementary skills where people have different backgrounds. So give us a sense. That's one thing that's always a challenge for new organizations, is how do you define the different roles, and more importantly, right, how do people accept what that role is? Because once you divide it up, it's really easy to start sort of bleeding over and handling other functions. It sounds like the three of you have really found a good sweet spot in terms of how you handle that.
Yeah, and I think and that's probably why the three of us work so well together and have come together, because we really complement each other. I think we're all very similar personality-wise, but we come with a very different skill set, each of us, and experience. For Jen, who she's the CEO of our organization, which made the most sense because she's been running. For 17 years, she ran a nonprofit, so she has a lot of that business experience that she could bring. So she focuses a lot on, just managing with our board, working on kind of sponsorship and fundraising to find the dollars to run our programming, and just overall kind of overseeing the organization. So she brings just an immense skill set into that role, which is fantastic. Hannah she's got a marketing communications background and graphic design. She's definitely more the design focused one of the three of us. We rely on her a lot. So a lot of what you're seeing with our brand on social media, the graphics, our annual reports, website, all of that, that's all Hannah. She's got such an amazing eye for that brand piece and making that brand very positive, in line with our values, and very appealing to girls and families that have daughters. So she handles she's our CMO, so our Chief Marketing Officer, and handles all of that stuff because, again, that's her strength area. And then for myself is operations. So I've been very operations focused around the development of things like curriculum and resources, the coaching education. So I actually run all and do all the operations for our programs. We then appoint program coordinators who I manage, who will then run our programs that are on the ground. But I run our volunteer trainings. I run all of those, as well as manage just how we're getting our programs set up and running, and the overall management of those. So that kind of led itself to my skill set and my experience over the last 11 years working in sport. And then we just supplement. So if there's anything that's missing, or that we need to cover, it sort of just falls, we have to have a discussion around who has the ability to manage that and take care of that. And then we make it work. And we're just kind of expanding and exploring how we continue to grow that, as we get bigger.
So you've now been doing this for about 2 years and in this current structure. And as you look ahead, it's always interesting to see a few things. One is, what have been the biggest challenges you've faced in those initial 2 years? It's a period of rapid growth. Not that the primary mission typically changes a lot, but the way that you're executing that mission and communicating that mission and all of the things that go into it, there's often a lot of tweaking that goes on in those first couple of years. No matter how much you plan, you
Mhm.
learn things once it starts rolling out and you get feedback from parents and the girls and everybody else involved. So let's start there with sort of some of those hurdles and things that you've seen as you've grown.
Yeah, I think our biggest hurdle right now is, yeah, I mean, it's definitely managing our passion project and not, having our other full-time jobs and managing all of that and finding the time to do it. I'd say a good challenge that we have is because our first programs have been really successful. We started with those 3 pilot programs in 2018. We then grew to 2019. We were then in 5 different states. And I think we had 6 actual location programs within those 5 states. We more than doubled our numbers in terms of registrations. We had 120 in our first season. In 2019, we had 344 registrations. So we had 245% growth in 1 year, which was amazing. So then there's a lot of challenges that come along with that. And I think we definitely had some programs that didn't get off the ground just in kind of setting them up and what we needed to have in place to have them be successful. So I think finding the right people is key, and we rely heavily on our champions on the ground, and we have our program coordinators and our community champions who are they're 2 positions that are really crucial to the success of a program. And it's finding the right person to put in that role, or the right people to put in those roles, and then supporting them in the right ways to help them be successful, which unfortunately, there's not a one size fits all kind of method. So what works in Ohio is going to be different than what works in Washington and what works in Southern California. So I think having to adjust our programming to fit each specific location needs was a big challenge. And that's something we're continually working on. And then I think overall, it's just making sure, can we get enough girls signed up for the program to make it a success and have it be a really good quality program, and make sure that we're not, turning upside down financially, and putting too much money into something that's not going to have the money come back in to keep sustaining that program. These are, I think anybody with a new business probably has this very, very similar challenges in that, but it's finding the time and then finding the resources that we need to make things successful. So I know it's a little bit more of a general answer to that question, but that's
I'm
kind of where we're
interested
at.
to hear about, you talked about the differences geographically in terms of what might work in one market and in different places. Is that a function of the messaging or the strength of the rugby community, or just more related to the individuals that you had involved in that marketplace?
I would say a little bit of the 2 latter ones. I think geographically, you look at what's some certain areas you go into, and it might be that, soccer is the #1 sport there, and their primary season might be spring. And we realized that we ran a fall program that was really successful. Then we get to the spring, and all of a sudden our numbers are halved. So, and we're trying to understand that. And we don't want to be a sport that's a year-round thing that the girls do. We want them to have a choice, and if they want to come to our program, we want them to be part of it. But we also encourage them for other seasons to go participate in other sports and other activities. So we found in some locations, just based on what's kind of going on socially for kids in those areas, we have to make some adjustments around that. I think as well, again, geographically, as you're looking at locations. So rugby, because we are a sport that is not all over the place, you will find that teams typically will travel, up like an hour or 2 hours just to go play another team. And we are very focused on making sure that the opportunities are very local, so that a parent doesn't have to drive more than hopefully 30 minutes to get to a game on the weekend, or 15 minutes to get to practice. So we've had to look geographically on what makes sense, where we're putting programs location-wise, and sometimes there's demand in other areas where it doesn't necessarily make sense for us to move into that location at that time. So those are some things, as well as then just cost. Our field costs and resource costs and cost out the door to run a program in San Diego is very, very different from a program in Olympia, Washington. So we have to account for those differences as well, geographically. And then I think too, person-wise, so we're not necessarily going into areas that rugby is very prominent. We're kind of focused on, we know that every area is an opportunity, so it doesn't have to be, most of our girls are not even rugby players to begin with, until they join our program. So having a big rugby presence it's not necessary. It helps if then more people know about rugby. But we do find that, it doesn't have to be a supportive rugby community. If there's not a lot going on, we can still start a program there. It just might take a little bit more to kind of educate the general population about what rugby is and what our programming is and that kind of stuff. Whereas we would be a little bit more tied in if there's a partner that already has a membership base and a lot of people there. So it's a lot of various challenges geographically, and what we typically try to do before we go into any area. So on our website, if people are interested in bringing girls rugby to their location, is they submit an application with a good amount of information for us to kind of learn about what is this area like. And then I will typically set up a call and we'll chat for an hour where I can just learn about what's going on here. Like, so what are the main sports in your area? What are the challenges that you have with getting girls out to this program? Why do you want to start this program? What's the volunteer base that we're looking at? Do you have interested families? Like, what's our fundraising sponsorship thing look like? So we're learning a lot about the areas before we go in hopes that we won't have any problems or challenges trying to get that off the ground.
So as you described that, obviously there's a enormous amount, and you guys are very diligent about making those decisions before you decide to go into a particular market. Give us a ballpark of what number of inquiries you get. How many different markets are coming to you on an annual basis? Obviously it's growing. You're still relatively new. People are finding out about you. Give us a sense of that scale.
I would say, if I had to estimate, I would say on average, we probably get a new program, like new location inquiry, maybe once a month on average. And where we're at, so prior to the spring season, we had 5 locations, 5 states, 6 actual program locations within those states. And then for fall, we actually were adding another 4 program locations, including states and then even Canada. So we're waiting to see kind of some things with COVID and if we had to cancel our spring season, and looking at what fall might look like. So if we don't continue with fall, looking at next spring is we may double the number of locations that we have and programs that we have out there, just because the interest is increasing drastically. And I think more and more programs, especially rugby programs, because we get a lot of interest from rugby programs or teams, they've tried a couple other things and they still can't get enough girls to come to their program. So adding a girls rugby program on top of what their current programming is makes a lot of sense, because then we can increase the number of girls coming in to the sport, and then they will transition into those other rugby programs that are offered, such as contact programs, or if they graduate out and go to high school and stuff like that. So we're growing, but we're also trying to manage that growth. And I want to make sure, especially in my role with operations, is that we're not growing too quickly, that we can't manage it. And I want to make sure that we have the right pieces in place and we're not trying to expand too quickly. So we might start saying no to some people to say we're not quite ready yet, unless it makes sense and we've got, X, Y, and Z in place.
Well, I want to congratulate you. I think the fact that you are seeing that type of growth and that type of interest clearly demonstrates that you have found a solid formula and a way to engage people in terms of what's going on. Again, you're going to learn a lot more as you go and as you're growing as an organization. And I think that that value comes along for anybody who's inquiring, because they don't have to start from scratch. That's usually one of the biggest issues organizations have, is somebody's really got a strong passion, but oftentimes they don't know how to set up the structure and the infrastructure that you've already got in place. So now
Yeah.
I'm going to say you've got the hardest part behind you, right? The first few years, getting it off the ground. Look ahead over the next 3 years and tell me what you see or what kinds of goals and targets girls rugby has for its own growth.
Yeah, when we started out, you know, and I think again, understanding those two kind of pillars of our programming, which is the rugby side and then the leadership and empowerment side, is, you know, we want to make a difference. At the end of the day, is if we can affect change in just one girl has a fantastic experience or learned something. You know, you hear these statistics all the time, and I think the Women's Sports Foundation, in one of their most recent reports, it was 1 in 3 girls is afraid to lead in the United States. So if we can help up that statistic and, you know, make sure that it's, you know, 3 out of 3 girls are not afraid to lead or something like that, that we can impact that change, that's exactly what we want to do. And when we started with the number of around 5,000, that was the number of kids playing non-contact rugby in the United States. We kind of said early on, we're like, we're gonna double that, and we're gonna make it 5,000 girls. So, you know, looking over the next 3 years, is we have a dream of, you know, getting 5,000 girls involved in our programming. And then that means that 5,000 girls are being active and getting the leadership and empowerment curriculum, and they're learning the skills to be the, you know, the leaders of tomorrow. So I think for us is we want to continue to provide opportunities for girls to participate. And I think that's all girls. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're reaching girls in every situation, whether it's, you know, economically challenged situations or rural areas where they don't normally have access to opportunities like this. It doesn't matter. We want to reach them all. And so I think we're going to start to expand our current programming. So the states and the programs that we're in currently, make those bigger and better, and then also expand to some new locations so we can reach more girls. And with that goal of, you know, to reach 5,000 girls and make that impact and have them feeling more confident and being better leaders and making new friends and team players and stuff like that, that would be, I'd feel really good about that if we can achieve that in the next couple of years.
Well, you should feel good, and it looks like you're on your way in a strong growth cycle and development. Tell us a little bit more. If you had a wish list, what can our listeners and our network help with? Where can we provide connections or assistance to what girls rugby is trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think, you know, for the listeners, there's a lot of different ways to get involved. I think, you know, easiest way and the lowest level of commitment is, you know, just follow our stuff on social media. You know, we're on Instagram and Facebook, and we're constantly putting out lots of images of our programs, of these strong, powerful young girls playing rugby and learning great things. So I think following that and sharing that type of information is great. We're always looking for financial partners, and, you know, people can donate, and all of that money goes right back into the programs and creating more opportunities for girls. So whether it's an organization that wants to sponsor, or it's an individual who wants to donate just to, you know, help empower more girls, we would always love that. If people want to actually get on the ground and help out, then, you know, for those, all the information's on our website, where you can get involved in a program that already exists as a volunteer coach. We're always looking for program coordinators for our new locations. So there's a couple different ways to get involved in our programs on the ground, as well as then we have, if people are interested in bringing girls rugby to their area, you know, we can have those conversations and get those pieces set up. And there's information on our website about that too. So I think the more support we can get in terms of followers online and people kind of donating to the cause, or connecting us up with other people and organizations that align with our values and what we're trying to do, those would be great ways that we would love to have them involved.
Fantastic. Well, if they want to reach you, obviously you've got a lot of information on your website. Is there a better way they should be reaching out to the organization in terms of connecting with you, or directly through the site? What's the best
For
opportunity?
sure. Yep. So our website is girlsrugbyinc.com. So it's girlsrugbyinc.com. And there's different ways you can sign up for our newsletter on there, or send a general inquiry to our email. But if people want to get in touch and they want to chat through, I'd be more than happy to chat with anyone. My email is Erin, ERIN, at girlsrugbyinc.com. So feel free to shoot me a message, or hit us up on social media. I respond to all of them. So would love to just chat more about how we can just keep pushing the mission and vision forward and helping more girls.
Well, Erin, thank you. You've given us some amazing information today. It's very impressive in terms of what you've been able to put together in a short amount of time. So now I want to take a minute and put you on the spot here before we let you go. And I want to ask you my favorite question, and we're going to use our sports philanthropy superpowers here and appoint you as commissioner of one of the sports. What sport would you choose?
You know, I thought about this, and I think I have to choose rugby. I mean, I don't think I can choose any other sport.
So now in your first day on the job, you have full authority and control, and you can make any of the changes that you want to see. What's the first thing that you're going to do with that power?
I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to say that my first role, first decision as commissioner, I'm going to make every school in the United States is going to institute a girls rugby program. Can I do that?
Sure, absolutely. You're in charge. You have
cheating a little bit, but
power. I think that would help keep girls involved. Obviously, as you look around, not only with girls but with all sports, the challenge is keeping kids involved as they get into middle school and high school, especially if they're not playing a sport that's perceived to be a high opportunity of college scholarship and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
actually, I'll change it a little bit, Roy. So I'll expand it a little bit, just a little bit. So instead of specific with girls rugby, what I'd say is every rugby program that exists for boys or men would be required to create a sister team. So if you had a high school program where they had a boys rugby program, then they would have to create a girls rugby high school program. And then same for youth all the way up through adult, college included. Because I think if we have a boys rugby program, we should be creating a girls rugby one. And I think that would increase opportunities for girls to get involved in the sport. And that would be my second decision as commissioner.
There you go. And I'm actually going to challenge you, because I think your first answer was better. That puts the women in front and leading the charge. Let the guys follow along if they want equal rights to play rugby. Let the girls lead the charge and take control. So
we'll do both.
Erin,
I'm going to do a lot when I'm as
commissioner. Thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time and generosity of sharing all of that information. If you didn't get a chance to see this directly, you can see all the information about Erin and about girls rugby up on our website. You can make sure that you go back and look at all of our podcasts, which are available on all the major podcast platforms. And we encourage you to tune in and listen each week. So again, Erin, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Roy. I really appreciated the time. Thanks for the whole experience.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to having you back for our next episode of the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. This is Roy Kessel signing off. We'll see you soon.